Well, my brothers and sisters, I think it's 109 days for Aucklanders in this lockdown that began shortly after the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary in mid-August. And now it's 15 Sundays where we have not had any access to the churches or participation really with Mass. And of course, as we all know, it's the first Sunday of Advent, the beginning of the new liturgical year, where we come again to renew and to restart with the Lord. And as we all know, I'm sure, the way that we live a healthy and holy spiritual life is to constantly restart. The saints are those who are not those who never fall, but those who constantly restart every day, every moment they know that they've failed to correspond to the Lord's goodness, love and grace. They restart, get straight back up, do not look at themselves, look at Christ and keep moving forward, trusting in His goodness, His mercy and His love. And there at the beginning of a liturgical year, we come back round again and again through this cycle. We must renew this intention to restart with the Lord, reconsecrate ourselves to the Lord, look again at the mystery of Christ and ask Him to give us a freshness in His love. And we especially need it in these days where so many issues and obstacles seem to be in our path and in our way on the road to living the life that we've become accustomed to. As you would have seen, and I'm sure you already are aware, I've put out on my Facebook page, it's on the parish website, and on the parish Facebook page, the details that we'll be undertaking, the structure that we'll have for the traffic light system. And as I have shown over the last many Sundays preaching on these topics, the virus itself, the vaccines, the mandates, the possible segregations that the government have been asking for. I have set down in the structure that we have for this parish masses that are open to all. So we will not be entering into the differentiation and segregation that the vaccine certificate system and the traffic light system, if we run them side by side, will ask for. And thereby, if you wish to know the details, if this is the first you're hearing of it, please do have a look on the website or the parish Facebook page or on my Facebook page, or if you're on the emailing list, you would see it and will have already seen it in the newsletter, where we lay out how we're going to achieve mass access for a majority of the parish. At Traffic Light Red, which is where we will be beginning in Auckland, the government have sneakily changed it in the last few days, which thankfully the secretary here, Alan, picked up upon. They moved and changed the number from 10 to 25, but never really announced or told that to anybody. Once again, a lack of transparency and a lack of honesty from the government, and in fact a kind of a deceptiveness, because having Mass for 10 is very, very difficult. But having Mass for 25 does change things, especially for a smaller parish like ours. So we're allowed to have 25 in the church, not counting readers and servers and other staff like the choir. So that allows that if we add a few more Masses to the parish weekly roster, we can have and get through up to 300 people at Mass in a week, which is essentially the number of people, sometimes more, but nonetheless, with COVID being the way it is and Delta the way it is, there are still a number who will not come to Mass anyway due to the concern for their health. So we will be able to get a majority of the parish through the Masses in 1 week. And there, as you've probably already seen, the way in which we will allocate the seats at those Masses is via the office. So please do email the office after having looked at the details that I've put out, and choose which Mass set or both that you would be able to come to, and we'll allocate you a space at Mass. Because we are reasonable and we're charitable, hopefully, we've been wanting to accommodate the concerns of people in their health, especially those who are vaccinated, of course, because the government have made this distinction, as have the New Zealand bishops. So therefore, a way to achieve that, like I alluded to last week in the homily, would be to have a certain part in the church which is for the vaccinated, for those who have a very strong sense of vulnerability in their health, if they're elderly and have already underlying health conditions, and thereby, even if they are vaccinated and get COVID, that would still be a great danger for them. So thereby, we will have an area in the church which is for the vaccinated, and that will be the crying room. And once we hit lights amber or green, where we can have more 50 and 100 in the church at Mass, if the number of vaccinated grow, then we will put the remainder, those with able bodies who can get up the stairs into the choir loft, we'll put them in the choir loft, so that the crying room and the choir loft are the so-called safer spaces for those vaccinated who are concerned about their health, and everybody else, including other vaccinated, can sit in the church with the typical every second pew roped off. We would ask that everyone wear a mask when it's reasonable for people to do so, and to use the normal disinfectant in and out of the church, and to use the QR system or sign in and out we will have, because you will be allocated a seat. You can tick your name when you arrive at the side door for the Mass, especially at traffic light red. The in and out door for the Mass will be here at the side door. So please, I won't go through all the details that I've sent out in the newsletter and elsewhere, but please do read through it a number of times to familiarize yourself with the system that we have set up. And it's very sad that we're in these days and the government places on us such limitations and forces us into these positions. It's not the way it should be, really. We all agree, we're all of one mind that people's health is important, especially those who are more vulnerable in our community. But remember that bodily health is not the most important thing for a Christian. Our spiritual health always has a primacy. The soul and its life always has a primacy over the life of the body in a Christian theology and regard and belief. And thereby to have the priorities in right order with respect to those truths is important for us as Christians. And thereby those priorities should be the things that order our decisions and give light to our decisions. Because the worship of God is not some cake, icing on the cake. It is a foundational necessity of a Christian life. And the freedom to worship is given us by God alone, not mediated through a mechanism of the state. It is indeed mediated through the authority in the church, of course. The bishops have that authority to regulate the worship. But even there are limitations, of course. There are certain things that even a pope cannot do. For example, a pope cannot get up one day and decide that he's going to cancel Lent, or decide that he's going to suppress some of the Eastern rites of the church, even if he had the so-called legal power to do so. It would be incredibly sinful and wrong for a pope to undertake such actions. So when people say that the authority in the church can regulate things and think that that's somehow an absolute power over the life of the church, it is not. The Pope and the bishops are there to serve what has been given in the revelation and the liturgy. The foundational elements of the liturgy especially are there given by Christ and are constitutive elements of the tradition which the Pope and the bishops are called to serve and are not masters of. It's a very, very important truth today to remember such things. So, as I've said last week, there are certain important reasons why I have chosen not to enter into the distinction when it comes to Mass attendance and to run separate Masses for the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. Because I believe it's a dangerous step to step into such a segregation in today's world and in this time of history, because I think it will easily be abused. There is a mission creep that is going on in many areas of life today. And sometimes people will say, and you see it said time to time in these debates and in the Christian spheres of these debates, that people are overreacting. It's not what they think. The government is okay. It's not going to push any further. There won't be this mission creep, or there won't be a slippery slope. Well, let me just give a couple of other examples in today's world where there have been these mission creeps and slippery slopes. Abortion. When abortion was brought in the 70s, in 73 in the United States, and a number of years later in New Zealand, I think it was 77, everyone said it was just so that it would be safe, legal, and rare. And over time, these things have crept up to the point that last year, this lovely Labour Greens government reformed the law such that now we have abortion up to birth. And at the time, Andrew Little, the Labour MP, was accusing anybody who was talking of mission creep and slippery slope that they were scaremongering, that they were dishonest, that they were lying and deceiving. And then, of course, only a few months later, we have the first baby that was aborted very late term and was left to die for 2 hours on a table in an abortion clinic. This has been the story of the abortion industry for the last 50 to 60 years, saying that it's only in special rare conditions and then making it available to all, abortion on demand, and the most barbaric practices undertaken in our so-called civilized societies. Mission creep of the worst kind, and they lie and cover it up, will never be honest about it, never address it, because underneath all they want is the convenience to get rid of the child if they want the woman to do so, if the woman wants to do so, or anybody else in the community for that matter. Another example, the whole gay political movement. At first, in the name of tolerance and compassion, to decriminalize homosexual activity, and that's all they say they wanted. Then they just wanted to be able to have equal space in the community. That's all they ever wanted. Then they want civil unions. No, we don't want access to gay marriage. This is all we ever wanted. Then they get gay marriage and they say this is all we ever wanted, and now they're pushing for adoption rights, access to reproductive technologies. There's always mission creep when it comes to these moral matters, and it's a deliberate ploy. It's the way they operate. They claim they only want this little step, but the end goal is to transform society, to redesign, socially engineer the society according to their liberal, progressive principles, and now it's the cultural Marxist principles. We'll come to that in a few moments. Another one, euthanasia. At the beginning, it's just mercy, it's compassion, it's only for those that are fatally ill, with illnesses where the pain cannot be treated. And as we know overseas, there has been extraordinary mission creep in every single country where the thin end of the wedge is initiated into law and slowly expanded to such a point in the most progressive countries, they now will put out of their misery so-called young people who are suffering from depression, legalized murder by the state, just like we had with abortion. And they are only but a few examples of where everybody says at the beginning, no, it's only in the exceptional cases, it's only a temporary thing, it's only for this, it's only for that, and then we suddenly find, because of the laxity and also the aggressiveness of the proponents, this becomes a widespread, accepted practice in the country and population, and everybody accepts it. Then further, they go another step further. The ones who oppose it, abortion, gay marriage, and the gay lifestyle and everything that comes along with it, euthanasia, and now the whole transgender movement, and all the other woke ideas, those that stand on the other side of these things are the immoral ones. They've managed to turn the tables, which they were always intending to do. such that in time the Bibles will be outlawed, or they'll have to be edited on particular topics because we do not fit the cultural Marxist ideology of the time and the progressive so-called values. And it's the way they have been working. They begin to bring in and get they reverse the morality, and then they point out the difference. So those that are on the other side, especially it'll be conservative people or Christians, those with religious values, they will say those people are different. Then they'll begin to say those people are immoral. Then they'll begin to say those people should have things taken off them unless they bow to our morality. And then they'll say they should be punished for the position that they have. And they begin to demonize that portion of the community. And this has been going on for a long time. Anyone who has the eyes to see it, the way that the mainstream media, and this is just one example, paints Christians is always to stir up a kind of animus. Most of the time, every now and again, there might be a feel-good story that's at least a little bit fair. But so much of the liberal mainstream media institutions run an attitude towards Christians in that way, and many of the papers that are taught in the universities are taught that way, such that we are seen always more and more as the ones that are nasty, that are immoral, that are judgmental. And yet the opposite is in fact the truth. The woke ideology of our time is so judgmental. If we do not stand in their values, it will cut, demonize, ostracize, and outcast. And that's what I'm worried about with this beginning of segregation with the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. People are saying, don't worry, it's only temporary. Don't worry, it's just on this facet. It will not go any further. But if we are careful and have the eyes to see it, and we also know well the history of the 20th century with how the Jews were painted and others in the Soviet system as well, we know that there is a very bad tendency in human nature to treat people and to cut them when we make these kinds of segregation. It's happened in the past, sadly, from time to time in Christian history. Thankfully, it's only been very, very small and in minority pockets. In the southern states of the United States, when they had the segregation, the churches tended to go along with it because it was kind of a peaceful way of just accepting these segregations. But we now know that even if they shrugged their shoulders, and some Christians, including Catholics, even seemed to agree with the segregation, we look back now with a kind of horror that why did we not stand up more? Why did we not oppose these systems a bit more? There often were, to be fair, Catholics, including many other Christians, who did oppose the segregation and stood with the people of colour. So we have to be honest in the real history. But there have been times where we have failed as Catholics. For example, in the time of St. Peter Claver, the beautiful saint of the slaves in South America, when the slaves were being brought out of Africa and the slave trade was running, and certain European nations were complicit in it, the Spanish especially. They were bringing many African slaves to the New World, and indeed some of the Spanish churches were closed to the people of colour because they thought of them as dangerous, somehow a contamination. And they may have looked at it through aristocratic lens, but nonetheless that doesn't make it right. They were culturally conditioned to think that it was legitimate even as Catholics. And some women, Spanish women living in the New World, would not enter a church when there were Catholic slaves there that St. Peter Claver had baptized. And he fought vigorously against this segregation, and the popes wrote against slavery, so don't let anyone tell you that the church didn't stand against the slave trade. But nonetheless, there were pockets in the mentality of the Christian people that accepted that it was okay to make differentiations on certain bodily conditions. And we have to be always very careful that we stand against such things. As we know, the Nazis did the same things to the Jews, and the way they ran the propaganda against the Jews was that they began to dehumanize them and make out that they were immoral. As we know, many of you know the history, it was often because of the way that the Jews had been successful with money and did not suffer the poverty in Germany in the same way as others did, and thereby there was a mechanism by which to get leverage against them and to make them to be the scapegoat for the problems. And when you see the way that some of the articles have been written recently, especially against that mayor in Coromandel who said that she wanted to wait for another kind of vaccine, she was spoken about and attacked as if she was an immoral person similar to a racist. How they have turned it around and made the unvaccinated the cause of the problem. The vaccinated are the cause of the pandemic. Sorry, the unvaccinated. This is not the language we should be using. This causes division. It creates the segregation that we're trying to avoid. And how we do not learn from history, how people have found so-called good reasons now by which to treat the unvaccinated in a secondary way, to make them sub-citizens, etc. And this is why, really, I think it's important to be prophetic, to stand and say no, even if we can't get the same numbers at Mass and we suffer for it. I would say this, people might say to me, but Father, if we allowed the segregation, we could get everyone to Mass. It's a very great good. Everyone can come to the spiritual good of the Mass. And I would answer, but at what cost? At what cost do we sell out our conscience on this matter just in order to get numbers through the door? Or is it better to stand in the truth of our conscience and on our principles and say, and be prophetic and say, I prefer that we remain clear on this matter, that when it comes to walking in the church door, we're not going to make a differentiation. And even if we were allowed to make such a differentiation, I don't believe the distinction between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated is strong enough, because both of us can be, or all of us can be, carriers in this regard. It is just that some have a less of a degree of spread than others. The same things, remember, my brothers and sisters, happened in South Africa with the apartheid system, where it was skin color and ethnicity. Sometimes people are segregated on their genetic structure. Sometimes it's socio-economic. Look at the way that Planned Parenthood is working against the poor and the people, the black Americans, African Americans over there. They put up their abortion clinics in the poor neighborhoods deliberately. Remember, Planned Parenthood was founded by Margaret Sanger, who was a eugenicist and a racist, wanting to get rid of people of color, and they continue with that ideology even if they disguise it. I just don't believe it's the right way forward. If we are to make this distinction on a bodily condition by which we let people in and out of certain masses, should we be asking them their sexual orientation? Should we be asking them their STD history, their sexually transmitted disease history, and seeing that they're safe? Should we be asking them any other vaccination history to see if they're safe, including the children? Should we be asking people whether they're taking the contraceptive pill? Should we be, making sure that everybody is got clean genes? Where does this end? And for those that say this is an extreme way of speaking and that I'm exaggerating, I just ask you to look at recent history on the moral issues that I've listed, including when you look at the 20th century and Nazi Germany. It is so easy for a population to be whipped up through fear into considering other people as not acceptable to be around and to not be shoulder to shoulder with there, and especially when it comes to church worship. St. Paul opposed St. Peter to his face because Peter was treating the circumcised Christians differently to the uncircumcised Christians, a bodily status that was based on Old Testament practices. And in fact, and we know this, Paul fought vigorously against this. When certain men were being baptized, they were also being requested to get circumcised, and if they didn't, they were treated differently by the Jews. And Paul and the church, the first council in the church, dealt with this problem, the Council of Jerusalem, and they determined that this kind of distinction would be done away with because Christ had done away with it. The true baptism, the true circumcision is baptism, I should say. And there all are welcome, slave and free, Greek and Jew, woman and man, etc. All are one and equal in Christ, and that should be represented in the way that we come into the churches, so that we are not differentiating people on the grounds of a vaccination or medical status, a so-called medical circumcision. But in saying that, because some will want to quibble with me and say, but aren't you segregating people by putting them into the crying room? No, that is a free choice that they can make, and it is just me trying to be reasonable and trying to be charitable towards those that feel very vulnerable, because I don't want them feeling so fearful that they completely stay away from Mass. I do want them to have a place where they can sit peacefully, and the crying room is the best place to do that, and I will take communion to that section of the community so that there's not the same risk that people feel as if the unvaccinated were given communion first. That is the workaround that I've tried to adopt in order to at least try to accommodate all in a charitable and inclusive manner. Please do read through the newsletter and the other editions that we've put out to take in all the details. After Mass today, there will be adoration again, following the Mass until 6 p.m. drive-in adoration. I'm still unwell and I've had some blood tests. The doctors are not quite sure what's wrong with me. I'm still not well at all. So I do say some prayers, and I do thank you for your prayers. I think it'll pass. I've had these kinds of things before, but we wait and see what the blood results show. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.